For the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Service Committee to order. May I have a motion on the minutes? Move. Seconded. Call questions in favor. Opposed. Motion carry. Next meeting with February 27th, 4 o'clock, same place. So we have two delegations today. The first one is on the Experience the Fraser, and I would like to call upon Chet and Yvonne to come up and do your presentation. Welcome.
I'll get used to the mic. There we go. Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Chad Wetch. I'm the General Manager of the Vancouver Coast and Mountains Tourism Region. This is my co-worker, Yvonne Chow. She is a Senior Program Advisor.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for your time today.
We are part of Destination BC, Provincial Crown Corporation, that leads development and growth of the BC tourism industry. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you on a key tourism development initiative in the region called Experience the Fraser. And the clicker.
It's not working.
If we can just advance to the next slide. It is meant to educate and inspire. Interpretive signage, cultural experiences, and attractions along the route are intended to provide education to users. It will provide opportunities to work with Indigenous and non-Indigenous partners to share natural history and cultural interpretation while instilling a conservation ethic in those enjoying the trail. It helps to achieve positive economic and community impacts. It helps to promote a safe and sustainable way to move around the city, a healthy lifestyle, and slow tourism, which will be a benefit for both residents and visitors.
Back to the map.
Perfect. There it is, Coast Canyon Trail. We are here today because we're hoping to find alignment with the City of Richmond in advancing this initiative, specifically the Coast Canyon Trail. The 500-kilometer plus trail is technically all in place, but not all sections are signed for wayfinding, and sections of the trail require improvements. In 2022, we hired a mapping specialist who's also an avid cyclist that rode the entire length of the trail. He has now produced reports and detailed route maps for all communities along the trail. The Richmond section of the trail is 30 kilometers long, and with approximately 70% of the trail separated from the road and made up of existing bike lanes. It starts at the Canada Line Bridge, goes under the Middle Arm Dyke Trail to Steveston, and ends at the Massey Tunnel Bike Shuttle. The trail takes users through viewpoints, parks, neighborhoods, and great attractions. Some potential projects that would be opportunities for us to work together would include signage to improve wayfinding. Having the entire trail signed is one of the main objectives for the project team. Trail improvements and enhancements. Interpretive kiosks, which can help advance cultural, sustainability, and reconciliation priorities. Imagine kiosks that speaks about the history of the river or highlight sustainability initiatives and interpretive kiosks featuring Indigenous cultural content. Directional signage at points of intersection with urban trails that can take people into the city to spend time and money at local businesses. For example, from the trail along the north arm of the Fraser, going along River Road, signage can direct people to the Golden Village for shopping and dining. Now, some of the resources that we can offer in support of this initiative would include the community report and maps. The community reports summarize the current trail, potential signage, locations, and projects along the trail. You will have access to our GIS mapping specialist. We want to emphasize that the maps we have produced is a starting point for discussion, and it would be great to discuss the routing with the appropriate city staff to ensure alignment with existing city plans. We have a grant writing program which you could access. And for any projects that might involve Indigenous communities, an Indigenous tourism specialist for the region can help with navigating engagement. Our team would also be available to facilitate with building partnerships that could help advance this initiative. The Experience the Fraser initiative already aligns with several federal and provincial strategies and is identified as an action item in the Metro Vancouver Destination Development Strategy. In working together with the City of Richmond, we could identify projects along the route that align with priorities for the city, the region, and the province. We hope to find a meaningful way to work together, and we would be grateful for the support of the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services Committee. Thank you again for your time today. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Obviously, it's something we'd be part of. You may not be able to answer it, but this may have to go to staff. A number of years ago, we signed up with the sort of the Cross Canada Trail System, and I wonder how you integrate with the Cross Canada Trail System, and do you overlap with any of the route?
Yes, I can answer that question. Yes, we do work with the Trans-Canada Trail. There are sections of the trail that do overlap, and so there would be signage for both trails along the route. I'm not sure if any portions of the ETF or the Experience the Fraser route that we've mapped so far in Richmond align. We would have to take a look at the maps that were created by our specialists and also in conversation with city staff to kind of figure out which sections would overlap.
Okay, I guess that would be very interesting to see, because there's only so much space out there and that are safe to go from here to Hope, and depending on which route you want to take and whether you're going to follow the river or not. Is the trail following the river, and what is the proximity to the river, or the furthest distance away from the river?
The trail follows the river as closely as possible. There are some sections that may be a little bit away from the river, in the sense that it might make use of some of the existing urban bike routes that are already in place. But the vision is to have it as close to the river as possible. So when our GIS mapper went to ride the trail, he kind of followed the route as closely as possible.
And my last question, Mr. Chairman, how far down the road have you saw what you've offered us, how far down the road have you already developed that? Or are you just a new fledgling coming forward with no signage along the way, there's nothing happening, et cetera. What have you done, and what is your source of funding?
Yes, so there are sections of, as Chad mentioned in the presentation, the initiative started in 2009, and in 2012, there was a number of implementation projects that took place with additional funding. So there is existing Experience the Fraser signage along some communities along the route. We have been, since 2019, the project team has been working with various communities to get their sections of the Experience the Fraser Trail signed. So most recently, Chilliwack has actually signed the majority of their section of the trail with funding through the provincial government as well as a federal active transportation fund. We have most recently been in touch with the city of Surrey, for example, and their section of the trail, as I mentioned, some of it goes through urban centers, and so in their case, we are working with them to kind of determine where the ETF might overlap with their urban trails, and they are actually have been very receptive with helping us with putting up the Experience the Fraser signage within Surrey. So I think within this year, the Surrey section will also be signed. And we've been in active conversations with the city of Abbotsford as well. We're trying to engage in the city of Hope, for example, for other infrastructure projects. So yes, there are ongoing projects, and funding is available because the Experience the Fraser aligns with multiple destination development strategies, as well as federal and other provincial strategies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Michael?
Thank you, through the chair, to presenters. My question, similar to Councillor McNulty, I'll ask it to staff later, but to you though, are you aware of the Great Blue Heron Way project, and how do you see that aligning? Because I know their map and your map, there's a lot, I'd say maybe 90% of your route is the same as theirs, but theirs also extends over to Vancouver Island and up to the North Shore and goes through Surrey, a different route. And specifically in Richmond, the portion that's different for their map, which I'm not sure if I have the final copy of theirs, but it jumps over onto Sea Island on the two-road bridge, and then it comes back to Richmond, I guess the Moray Swing Bridge, and then north, which I can't tell if it's Oak Street or Canada Line that they use. So you're nodding that you're aware of them, but could you speak to the overlap? Because I know you mentioned Indigenous tourism specialists, but they've mapped all the different First Nations along the route, and that's partly why they're going the route that they are, to connect.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, the project team is aware of the Great Blue Heron Way, and we haven't yet engaged with them directly, but the idea of the Experience of Fraser is that it's almost like a cycle highway, if you will. So it's like a main route of about 500 kilometers long, going from the Salish Sea to Hope, and within that there would be overlap with the Trans-Canada Trail. It would also have probably junction points with other existing trails like the Great Blue Heron Way. So our intention is not to take over or anything with these other existing trails. The idea is that we have a single connecting route across the Vancouver Coast and Mountains region, but also have connecting points with all of these other wonderful trail infrastructure in various communities across the region.
Great. I have a few contacts that if you're looking to connect with somebody from the Great Blue Heron Way, I can share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So is there a fee to join any of these associations, or do you just provide information so we can go get our own grants?
No, there's no fee at all. We are the tourism region, and this is one of the catalyst projects for the Metro Vancouver Regional District, as well as the Fraser Valley Regional District. Well, I would say the destination development strategies. Within that, it's a catalyst project, and we have I would say, an informal team of very passionate people who want to move this forward and want to see the Experience of Fraser come to life. And so there is no cost to be part of this. It is really just a partnership between us and the city or any community destination management organizations. Any way that we can work together, that would be wonderful for us.
Perfect. And then I'm looking at the north arm of this trail, and we have River Road that runs along the river. Is the trail going to be on the Burnaby side or the Richmond side?
Well, it would kind of connect. It should go all the way through. Well, yeah. I think we would have to take a closer look at the maps. I don't think I can answer that question at the moment, but the trail is meant to go on both sides of the river.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
there's
so
alternatives.
it depends on what is the easiest and if there is infrastructure in place at this point, because we are relying on a lot of the existing trails that are already in place. And I believe Burnaby has a very good trail system existing already. But we haven't engaged with them yet on their part of the trail, so.
Yeah, maybe take a look at that, because we do have River Road that runs all the way pretty much to Queensboro.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask, have you approached Tourism Richmond to let them know what you're up to?
Yes, the Tourism Richmond is aware, and they are very supportive of Experience the Fraser. There was a meeting, I believe, in October with Sherry on the Tourism Development Liaison, as well with Tourism Richmond at the time. Yeah.
And the grants that we can apply for, I noticed a couple of grants that were listed on one of your pages here. Can we apply for trails that are already built, or do we have to put them towards new upgrades or new trails?
That's a good question. That would be a question for our grant writing team. However, I know that, we could apply for basically anything. We can have our grant writers, evaluate the request and then find the best way forward and find the right grant for what you want to do.
Perfect, because we've got the dike all the way around Richmond, and really all we need is signs and we're good to go. So,
Excellent.
yeah, you picked a good city.
We're very excited and we're very happy to be here.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Good, thank you very much for the presentation. Now, I think if we are going to further explore this further, I think it would be appropriate for us to make a motion to staff to follow up with Destination BC. So do I have a motion? So moved. Move.
Staff to investigate.
Exactly. Okay, so move and second it. Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So moving onward, with another delegation, Debbie and Calvin, they're going to speak on the adding names to center path in Richmond of the Japanese soldiers.
Good afternoon. Can
Welcome.
everybody hear me? All right. My name is Debbie Jang. I'm here with Mr. Kelvin Higo. Thank you for listening today to our presentation. Had I known I could have put a PowerPoint up there, would have pictures speak 1,000 words, but I will do my best. When I was the national coordinator of the Lest We Forget Cenotaph Research Project at Library and Archives Canada in Ottawa, I saw many cenotaphs and many, many names from communities across Canada. One of my own favorite cenotaphs in all of Canada is the Japanese-Canadian War Memorial located in Stanley Park. I found it strange, though, that this memorial contained names of those who survived the war, along with those who died in the war. Usually, cenotaphs from where the soldiers enlisted, lived, and worked bore their names, so that townspeople would remember them when they walked by or drove by. Stanley Park is a tourist area, and local Richmondites do not usually stroll by there and recognize out of the 196 names, oh, there is Private so-and-so from Richmond. No one even knows that these Canadian places the soldiers belong to from where they came. 7 of those names are actually from Raymond, Alberta. Just a few statistics to bring us back in time to 1914, an era when Japan was Great Britain's ally. 660,000 Canadians served in the First World War, men and women. 66,000 perished as a result. The population of Canada was only 8 million people at the time. There were only 10,000 Japanese Canadians in all of Canada in 1914. 200 of these Japanese Canadians volunteered to serve in the First World War. Of this number, 55 never came home. That is a 25% attrition rate, which is extremely high for a small population like the Japanese Canadians. 92 were wounded and only a dozen came home unscathed. 13 of these soldiers received the military medal for bravery, 2 received the Cross of St. George, and 1 even received the military medal with bar. This is an unusual list of statistics that I just read to you. So we must understand the context in which the soldiers from Richmond, from Sea Island, served in this world conflict. There are 2 soldiers today whose names we wish to bring forward for consideration to add to the local cenotaph here in Richmond, British Columbia. I will now go through just a little bit of a historical background of Richmond as we know it. Japanese Canadian fishermen have long been part of the city of Richmond's history and maritime culture. Steveston was the hub of immigration from Wakayama Prefecture, Japan, after pioneer Gihei Kuno came and was so impressed by the abundance of salmon in the Fraser River. Summoning his countrymen to come to British Columbia, the first wave of issei began to arrive in the late 19th century. Canneries sprang up along the Steveston waterfront and on Sea Island, where many Japanese Canadians fished and worked. Many were naturalized British subjects. One of the largest family clans to immigrate from Fukuoka, Japan, to Richmond were the Koyanagi families. At this time, as we heard in 1914, when the First World War broke out, Canada, or as an extension of Great Britain, was eager to serve in the First World War. The Japanese also were eager to serve as they were allies. British Columbia's Japanese Canadians wasted no time in forming a battalion of 200 volunteers to serve king and country. But local politicians and even Prime Minister Sir Robert Borden rejected them. Racism was rife, but by 1916, the need for replacement troops on the Western Front was dire. Military leaders in Alberta were keen to accept the volunteers and welcome the Japanese Canadians from British Columbia. This is the explanation why Japanese Canadian soldiers' attestation papers in their military records show Albertan addresses. Instead of Eburn, Steveston, Vancouver, Nass, or Skeena rivers, places from where these fishermen immigrants came from Japan and worked and were recruited for war service, or volunteered in their case. However, by studying the next of kin cards, the medal cards, pay ledgers found in the First World War records, they hold solid clues as to where these soldier fishermen actually lived and worked prior to the war. In addition, by studying the data in clusters, patterns of relationships can be seen among clansmen and those sharing the same profession. For example, out of 7 soldiers who enlisted together between September 1st and 5th, 1916, in Calgary, 5 of them gave 240 Alexander Street in Vancouver as their latest address. It was a rooming house in the Powell Street area. In the cases of Private Koyanagi and Private Harada, both clearly stated on their attestation papers that they were fishermen by profession. Koyanagi's marriage certificate gives the strongest evidence that he worked and lived in Eburn. He states Terra Nova as his residence. On May 10th, 1913, he married Toshi Koyanagi in Vancouver. But tragically, Toshi died in childbirth on March 7th, 1914. Depressed and distraught, Hikotaro Koyanagi disappeared for 6 months. By the time friends and family found him, he and his cousin had enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Both their addresses were 240 Alexander Street. This was a temporary address that they were using where they were staying for a few months in 1916, when the Japanese Canadian Battalion was raised up. Toshi Koyanagi was the younger sister of Sakumatsu Koyanagi, children of Matsuzo Koyanagi and Sumanishi. Her husband, Hikotaro, was the brother of Kuichi Koyanagi, children of Ichimatsu and Haya Harada. All of these men were multi-generational fishers in Japan and Eburn. Toshi's maternal grandmother's name, apparently, was Harada as well. Private Kazuo Harada was the nephew of a fisherman called Otohachi Koyanagi. Kazuo's mother was Teo Koyanagi, and his brother's surname was also Koyanagi. So this uncle, Otohachi Koyanagi, was his only relative in Canada, and so we find in his military records that he left his assigned monthly pay to his uncle, who worked at the Terra Nova cannery in Eburn. Harada had immigrated to Canada on March 9th, 1915. 16 months later, he had joined the 175th Battalion in the Canadian Army. Therefore, there are no school records nor census records since he arrived at age 23 after the 1911 census was taken, and he had died before the 1921 census could be recorded. Now, during the Second World War, an interesting piece of evidence has surfaced since the Landscapes of Injustice archive has been released. When 22,000 Japanese Canadians were forcibly uprooted from and dispossessed, Otohachi Koinagi's son, Ryushin, wrote a letter of protest to the federal government. In it, he said, lamented, "I have just received your letter of statement of my account July 20, 1944. To say that I was shocked is putting it mildly. I am sure my aged parents will be shocked too when they learn that the land which they bought from me with their labor, of their sweat and tears, have been sold. I now know that my cousins who fought and died in France for Canada during the last war have died in vain. You have cunningly taken advantage of this war to deprive illegally the properties which I, a Canadian subject, had acquired legally." So you see that Ryushin Koinagi's cousins are none other than Hikotaro and Kazuo Harada, as there are no other Japanese Canadian fishermen soldiers within the Koinagi family tree. The men both listed on the same day, September 1st, 1916, at the same recruitment office in Calgary, one man standing behind the other, because you can tell by their enlistment numbers, regimental numbers, 697077 and 69777078. There was another man in the lineup on the same day, also from Sea Island, Daitaro Araki. The only difference is that Araki survived the war and he did come home. Now, a word about local commemoration. As I began this presentation speaking of the War Memorial in Stanley Park, just a few notes that this was a privately paid for memorial, by the Japanese Canadian community. It was established on April the 9th, 1920 in Stanley Park. 1 year later, the Great War Veterans Association of Cumberland, BC, on Vancouver Island, erected a memorial arch with a bronze tablet, and there bears two names of their town's war dead, including a Private Matsumura and a Private Yamada. Apart from this memorial in Cumberland, there's no other town whose local war memorial in British Columbia honors any Japanese Canadian who died in the First World War. However, in Raymond, Alberta, as mentioned earlier, on their cenotaph, you will find the names of Private Sujimoto and Private Suda, because that is a town from where they fought and died, from where they came, fought and died in the First World War. Outside of these memorials, there is no other cenotaph in Canada that commemorates the fallen Japanese Canadian soldiers. There is, however, a book of remembrance on the third floor of the Peace Tower in Parliament at Centre Block. I've seen this book many times, watching the pages turn daily as I was a tour guide there for many years. That is the only place you can see the Japanese soldiers' names outside of Stanley Park. The Richmond Cenotaph was erected at a time when the Japanese Canadians did not have the right to vote and were seen as a threat to the white population. The names of Japanese Canadians from Sea Island and Steveston were omitted from the cenotaph by a prejudiced society. Mr. Kelvin Higo and I proposed to have the names of Privates Koinagi and Harada added on to the Celtic cross-shaped war memorial here in Richmond. These soldiers' relatives are highly in favor. We seek to honor and recognize them for their contribution that they made to Canada's war effort, albeit 103 years late. It's time to bring them home, lest we forget. In closing, I would just like to read to you Private Harada's military records hospital card. He was wounded first in the eye after he received shrapnel to the face in March of 1917. He did survive this wound and returned to battle. However, just a year later, and that battle was days before the Battle of Vimy Ridge, at the Battle of Amiens on August 10, 1918, Private Harada was grievously wounded. He sustained fractures of the right femur, the right ulna involving the elbow joint, left leg was fractured at the tibia, large wounds at the back of both shoulders, and the condition of the man on admission here was so profound in septicemia from which he never recovered. He died 5 days later and is buried in the United Kingdom, where the hospital that he died is located. Private Koyanagi's body was never found. He died at the Battle of Passchendaele. So his name is commemorated in Belgium at a place called the Menin Gate. He has no known grave. Thank you for your listening, and we are here to take questions now.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I think this is going to be a very meaningful project. Any questions? Michael?
Yeah, thank you for sharing all the history in this presentation. I'm not a Canadian military buff, but I consulted one. And he had mentioned that there might be some policy around having a name on more than one war memorial or more than one cenotaph. So I dialed a number for Veterans Affairs and explained this. They weren't able to answer. They directed me to Department of National Defense. They don't have a call option that I could get a hold of anyone, and it was too late for them to do the email exchange. So do you know if this is possible? Because you did mention Cumberland where they put it on a memorial arch. So that means the names of those two veterans are on the Japanese War Memorial and on this memorial arch. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wolf. So for the example of the soldiers in Raymond, it's a very good point. Their names appear on their town cenotaph in Raymond, as do the Cumberland, BC soldiers on these brass plaques. Now, their names are also visible on the Stanley Park War Memorial. So in fact, this has been done before, that they appear in more than one place. I did research this question, the answer to your question, and as far as we know, even the War Memorial Trust, which is located in the UK, there is no protocol that you can find to say a soldier's name cannot appear in more than one memorial. In fact, you will find stained glass windows, Bibles, bench plaques. There are more than one place you will find a deceased soldier whose name has been placed there by their family or by their church or by their school. In terms of the Japanese Canadians, I have exhausted my research and have not been able to find any reason why their local town from where they came with evidence could not have that soldier's name engraved on their cenotaph.
Great, thank you.
Good. Bill?
That was my question. I would maintain that all the names that are out front are on some national monument of where they were fallen. And they respect them, and we respect them, and that's why we put them there. I'd like to make a motion, Your Worship, if I may. My motion is to refer this to staff, but we have to remember that the monument outside was done by the veterans of Richmond in 1922. Okay, it wasn't done by the city or the municipality, or the township of the municipality of Richmond. It was done by the veterans. Anyhow, my motion is, first of all, that the city of Richmond acknowledge these two Canadian veterans and their contribution to Canada. I think it's extremely important that we do that first. And that the names be appropriately added to the Richmond City Cenotaph. It's not a national cenotaph, in time for the National Civic Ceremony on November the 11th, 2024. So that's a three-part, Your Worship, or Mr. Chairman. And so staff have a little bit of research to do.
Yes.
Whether they can be on there, I think that's been answered by itself. We are not a national monument outside. We are a local monument. And we can put them up here in City Hall if we want to put their names here as well. Not that I would do that. So anyhow, I leave that to refer to staff to follow through.
This is the third part, right?
Sorry.
So do another part?
There are three. Oh, I do have another one, but not with regard to this. I'll add that if see what happens on this one.
First move, second. Any further discussions? So call a question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I have another one to go with it, and I think it's important. And thank you very, very much for bringing it forward. I feel very strongly about this personally. I had a father that went overseas. My other one is that the city investigate through the appropriate bodies to see if there are any other members, men or women, of the Southeast Asian descent and/or including First Nations that were fallen who lived or resided in Richmond. Richmond being the islands, Sea Island, and the 21 islands.
Is second? So, any questions? Further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Good.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy
Thank
that's
you very
how we're
much.
proceeding forward. Okay, then come to the next item, Langston Stevenson Dock off-leash area update. Staff? Kelvin?
Thank you,
So,
Chair and
yep,
committee.
anything to add
Staff,
or anything you want to say?
staff has nothing more to add to the report. We're happy to answer any questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
so Michael?
Yeah, thank you through the chair to staff. Great, thanks for the report and all the options. I am in support of option 1, which is outlined on our page 14. I know there are a couple members of the public who'd like to speak to this. Before they speak, I just have a question to staff as you're there. So actually 2 questions. One is, it says under this option that there'd be a $40,000 financial impact from option 1. And I assume that some of that 40,000 is to get the trees planted in the wider buffer. My question then is, can some of those trees not already be funded through the tree protection bylaw work? Like when a property goes up and they can't fit all the trees that they are supposed to put on their property, don't we have like quite a large amount of cash in lieu that, or trees that need a place to go? And could this not be one of them?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, to your first point, that's correct. The 40,000 would be to cover the plan, construct the plan outlined in the attachment. We would have to look into the availability of other tree planting funds. It may be that we have some funding available, but I suspect that we would need somewhere in the range of 40,000 to complete that project.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll leave it to you to investigate, and unless that was already taken off the cost, and that's why I kind of thought maybe 40,000's the remainder after some of that cash in lieu trees. My second question was on our page 35, it shows kind of a map of this area, and oh, sorry, no. Page 35 shows what the new mound would look like with option 1, where it'd be heightened land, there'd be more trees, coniferous trees shown on this image. That's great. My question then relates, I guess, to the opposite page, 36, kind of shows that there's 10 properties that back on to this dog enclosure space. My question is, kind of 2-part, I guess. What was the percentage of them, those owners' participation, and did they have that kind of 75% in favor, 25% opposed, or were they all opposed? And will they be given more consultation with this choice made today?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, when we conduct the engagement process, we don't have that breakdown of sort of individuals and how they responded. That said, based on our interactions through the on-site open houses, of which there were 2, we're confident that the majority of residents in this stretch that you identified are in opposition or were in opposition to the project. On page 36, you referenced the original concept plan, so the new concept plan that we're proposing on page 34, if directed to proceed with option 1 as recommended in the report, we would be proceeding with construction as opposed to further engagement.
Also, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, in the Let's Talk Richmond platform, we only require respondents to respond with an area code instead of an actual address. So staff wouldn't know in terms of the specific response which household is coming from. But you're right, I think in the overall engagement effort, we've seen over 300 comments coming back, and these are 10 houses or 10, potentially 10 respondents out of the overall pool. So just to give you the context.
Okay, then, yeah, just my last comment then is, after some discussion and perhaps hearing from the members of the public, yeah, I would really like to ensure that those 10 properties are given, I don't know what the next step looks like in consultation, but if, let's say, option 1 is supported today, it goes to council and gets support, that staff go directly to those 10 properties to inform them what was just decided. Because if all of them are again up in arms and in opposition to it, let's hear about that before we get started and have to delay further work. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Carol?
Thank you very much. Well, Councillor Wolf has asked most of my questions, and I was just going to make a suggestion. It's only 10 properties. Why don't we send this to those 10 properties in the form of a letter prior to it coming to council, if it should get approved by the committee today? Because I think that the improvements are pretty amazing, especially I like the idea of the berm and the trees. Now, I'm assuming with, climate change and everything, are you going to put irrigation in that 3-foot high berm so those trees survive?
Go ahead.
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Day. We haven't made that determination yet, and in some cases with native species, they may not be as reliant on irrigation, but certainly watering through the establishment period. But to your question, we would take any steps necessary to ensure the long-term health of trees planted in that area.
Because I would think that you're going to have a water spout for dogs' water anyhow, right? So yeah, having planted on a very small berm trees and having most of them die, that's why I ask. And so I just want to make sure that we're going to do this properly. The grasses will be fine, but trees, they can be a little temperamental if they're off the ground. And other than that, so just to confirm, the space between the property line and where the dog park is actually going to start is 15 meters, is that right? No, hold on.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that buffer, if you refer to the
On page 35.
the section, on page 35, that's correct. The 15 meters represents the distance from the park and private property line to the proposed enclosure.
Yeah, to where the actual fence would be. Okay, that's a big difference from what we had before. But I think what's really a big difference is the plantings and the berm. That's going to make a significant difference. Well, I'm excited to hear what the neighbors have to say, and let's make sure that we reach out to them. I can't make that motion because I don't sit on this committee, but I would imagine that that might be something you want to consider.
Very good. Bill?
Yeah, just quickly, I support both. We've come a long way. I think we've got the public input. It's come back. And I agree with Carol. I think the 10 properties that we've got that probably had the most to say, send them a copy of this and let them read it and what have you. Just in terms of, and I agree with Michael on the trees, we've got developers having to do 2 and 3 to 1 on trees. Here's a good place to plant them. Okay, and I'm not talking twigs, I'm talking trees. Okay, so I think, and that's the other thing is the placement of the trees. Let's hope that everybody is happy with that placement of the trees, especially along, we'll call it on our map, the north perimeter. Okay, I don't want to hear people saying, well, it's going to block my view now, I can't see Mount Baker or whatever because you planted a 10-foot tall tree. So I'm just trying to be positive on it, and I'm sure we can mitigate some of the costs and stuff. So anyhow, I think this should go ahead to the next round, and maybe take Carol's point under advisement.
Okay, before I entertain the motion, I want to ask if any member of the public would like to speak at this time on this issue. Okay, so I can excuse staff and I would like to invite this gentleman to come forward. Please have your name and your 5 minutes.
Hello, councilors. My name is Sergey Volpov.
Okay.
I'm one of the residents that is affected by this dog park. And I just want to say on behalf of 10 other properties and 6 more neighbors, so there's a total of 17 properties, 10 immediately affected the development of the dog park, and some other neighbors who were vehemently against the dog park being right next to the property. We did the presentation, I think it was about 3 months ago, and I think the city staff hasn't addressed any of our concerns in terms of the noise level, in terms of proximity to the properties, and so forth. Also, just want to add that during the second round of consultations, we were disappointed that the city did not provide any other alternative to the location of the dog park. We walk the city, Steveston, London park area like every day, all the neighbors, and there's a huge amount of empty land right in the middle of the field, and about 7 acres, and I'm sure 0.75 of an acre of a dog park could be placed somewhere in the middle. So this is, I mean, we would like to see some options, other options for the dog park.
Okay, so at this point...
Also, just kind of, when the survey was conducted, there's really no information that was asked about what residents really think. There's no, for example, I mean, I would have assumed that there would be a question of how far the dog park should be from the residents, like have a multiple choice question, whether it's 8 meters, 25 meters, 50 meters, 100 meters. And then that information could have been used for future planning of other dog parks. So I think that was missing from the survey as well. I'm not aware of the new proposal, so I can't really speak to what it is. But the old proposal was 8 meters from the fence, and that was encroaching on like that was very close to the residences.
Okay, so Michael, you have a question?
Thank you for coming. A couple questions. First one, you said 17 properties affected and 10 are back onto this site. Are you confident that all of them are in opposition?
All of them in opposition. Yeah, we constantly communicate by emails
and you yourself were not aware of the differences in the option that's being presented today? Like it sounded like you're basing your vision of this on the what was already built, like the location that's already there, the 8-meter buffer.
That's
so
right.
I think the staff have addressed some of the concerns that you just brought up, like proximity. The proximity is nearly double the distance, or the proximity to your back fence. The noise level would be different because there's going to be a much thicker planting and heightened berm that physically blocks the sound travel. I'm aware of a few dog parks about this size in Richmond where residents are about 8 meters beside, and for much of the year, the annual plants, the city doesn't mow them and lets them create quite a good sound barrier for at least the small dogs that are closer to the ground. So I would encourage you to ask your neighbors, the 17 properties, to look in the package that's here tonight, because it's going to go to council in 2 weeks, Monday in 2 weeks, and in there, they'll see that their staff did consider a different location as well in the London Steveston Park, and it's the recreational open lawn. I'm not sure if that references any place in your mind, but there's descriptions of it in the report. So what we're considering today is one of the options, which is to address the concerns that we heard. So proximity, noise. So I think that's addressed.
Well, yeah, respectfully to your point that there's other dog parks 8 meters away from residential areas. I am not aware of any dog parks in Richmond that close. The closest dog park would be in Aberdeen, but that's not a residential area. Well, it is a residential area, but that's a high-rise building. So that's, and it's not 8 meters. It's further away. So there's no other dog parks in Richmond.
There's one on Audlin Road, Audlin Park. That's the same distance.
Again, we're talking about the single-family residential homes and
townhouse. Townhouses directly on.
That's
the
that's a little different.
Yes, that we call for a motion, and at the same time, the motion should include what has been suggested, that we contact or a letter be sent to the property owners in the neighborhood, so that they can be aware of the options that we offer, and also the decision that we make today.
Maybe we have a copy tonight to take with.
Yes.
I've got it. I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah, we can do that right away.
Staff should give it to.
Okay. So anyway, I would like to ask for a motion.
Yeah. Who is the staff member they can contact? Delegations here.
Yeah, okay, so Jason would be the staff.
This gentleman here, is who you can contact? Okay. All right, I'll make the motion.
Okay, make the motion. Second. Any further discussion? Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Forward.
Okay, moving forward.
gonna get-
Award of contract 8239P. No, she's not here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have nothing to add and would be happy to answer any questions.
Michael?
Thank you. Just through the chair to staff, quick question I have is, there, maybe on the bottom, page 40, it shows the ranking of the 4 applicants that's submitted proposals. What we do not have, though, is information on did ProSafe or Royal Life Saving Society offer any different services, or was there any benefits that the LIT Aquatics, which we are recommending in this report, is there anything that they would have given us that we don't get now?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, LIT Aquatics did provide a guaranteed minimum profit, and we are very confident that they have the capacity and resources to be able to deliver the volume of courses that we require in the timeline that we're also requiring.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, good. Bill?
No, I'm okay.
Oh, you okay? Yeah. I just want to mention that, I attended some regional meetings, and I got a feedback that the other cities really appreciate that Richmond is offering this training program, and they felt that they also benefited from this training program. So this staff recommendation, motion, move, second, call the question, those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Then comes to item number 4, the First Nation Bunkhouse interpretive program. Now, I will ask staff to do a brief presentation, and after that, I would invite Mr. Harold Steves to come forward. Okay, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief introduction. Since the report presented to Council in 2021, staff have completed extensive research on the history of the building. It's confirmed to have been constructed in the 1890s and believed to be the only structure of its kind in BC. To recognize the importance of this building, we will be constructing a replica, salvaging as many heritage elements as possible. The exhibits and programs in this space will be designed to complement the existing interpretation of Britannia shipyards and will help address a gap in the interpretation of Indigenous peoples at Steveston heritage sites. Staff will work with the Indigenous communities in the development of interpretation, and Musqueam representatives were informed of the presentation of this report today and have reconfirmed their interest in participating in the next steps for this facility. Happy to respond to questions anyone has.
So any questions? Okay, Bill?
Yeah, thanks very much for the report. Obviously, we're getting into it. Two things. Number one, who is our Musqueam contact? Who do we use as to represent the Musqueams on issues like that in the city?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, I work often with Jason Woolman, who is the archivist for the Musqueam. Larissa Grant is also has been part of many conversations, including conversations around this facility. They will be connecting with other people in Musqueam. I know there are councillors who are interested in participating and having a voice in this project, as well as potentially other members. So as we move forward, additional people will be identified.
Okay. I'll wait till my 30. We're doing a replica building. How much of the original can we do? I mean, wasn't this building where they had the potlatch in 1906 or 1922? And it was the potlatch building for Steveston?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, I'm not aware of that history, but would be happy to learn more about it if you have further information. In terms of salvage, I will defer to my colleague here.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we will deconstruct, and according to the condition of the facility itself, we will salvage as much as possible. At this time, until we start deconstruction with the condition it is in, because it's unsafe, we cannot actually determine the percentage, but we can, once we deconstruct, come back to council.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd like to try to be as original as possible if we can. And the other thing, my suggestion on this whole construction, I'm wondering if there shouldn't be a committee formed, like we used to have to on it with the people you're suggesting, some old timers from Steveston that have been there, some staff, etc., to carry on. And this is sort of one of our jewels again that we want to get, like the Japanese bunkhouse, what we did, and I think we had a committee when we did the Chinese bunkhouse upstairs and stuff. First class. Anybody that's been there, it's great. And not so. Anyhow, it's a suggestion. I don't know if you consider it or not, but I think it should be considered as an advisory committee. Okay.
Michael?
Thank you. I got a few questions. They're all fairly quick, though. At the beginning of this report, it mentions that this report is also responding to the referral about welcome totems and house posts, and neither of those are recommended for this site. So does that close the referral, or are staff still going to be looking for other locations for those?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I think this would close those existing referrals. We can explore the possibility of Indigenous art pieces, carvings, welcome figures, that sort of thing, through the engagement process. I think it will likely come up naturally that these are part of interpretation, telling of Indigenous stories at these sort of sites. So it's certainly not that the possibility for that is closed. If something like that were to be recommended by Indigenous community members, that is something we would bring back to council, as it's not currently part of this project.
Okay, thanks. And a follow-up question is, on our page 60 or 61, it shows the map overhead view of this area, and the addition, like I just walked it the other day, and the addition here is that number 4, called the Gathering Circle for Flexible Programming and Interpretation. I guess 2 questions. One, is that circle a covered space that after hours anyone can come in and utilize it? Or is it open? And then if it is open, then what does that circle in the center represent?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, this is a concept drawing, so there are likely going to be changes. And the idea of it being covered or not is something that can be considered. Again, that's not currently part of how the project's been costed, is not to build another structure on site. Additionally, any structures such as that would be subject to a heritage alteration permit process, as the landscape itself is part of the national designation.
Okay, thanks. And the last two questions, real quick ones. It mentions that the roof used to be shingles. It's not. It's metal now. 'Cause it's been moved and stuff. Is there plans to go back to shingle, wood shingle, cedar roof?
Through the chair, I'll defer to my colleague here.
The chair to Councillor Wolf, we would like to bring it back to its original, so yes, we will be going back to shingles.
Okay, thanks. And then my last question is about the wood. I don't know if we would have the history on where that wood was milled, because like Councillor McNulty, I really do not want to see a trash bin going to eco-waste with a bunch of the wood. I know it's probably not all structurally sound to hold the walls up, but I think it definitely should outline the structure, whatever the outer wall is. I think it should be slapped with those existing panels. So I think we should be recovering almost all of them for some use. Thanks.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I have a question. So what is the timeline? So when do we expect that this project be ready and the place will be, made public?
To the chair, I can speak to the timeline around the engagement and programming and interpretation. We would be looking to start the engagement process this year. The length of that process is to be determined. I think we will work with Indigenous communities at the speed that they can have capacity to work with us on this. We can do programming in the space once it's complete, as on a temporary basis, and that's what having staff positions would help us do. So even if there are not permanent exhibits installed, we can start interpreting that space in some ways. Regarding the construction timeline, I'll defer to my colleague Mark.
To the chair, once engagement is complete, we will start and complete the design. Once the design is complete, we are looking at possibly coinciding with the work on the SaneNet loft. Economies of scale, so we won't close down the site more than one time. The laydown areas are also difficult, so that will be at the end of 2025. Once we complete the design, we will start implementation with a completion of the beginning of 2027.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So seeing no further questions for staff, I would like to excuse staff and ask Mr. Harry Stiles to come forward. I know there is some good things to say. Okay, so Harold and Lawrence Lai.
If staff would just wait, I'll give you, my computer, my printer ran out of ink. So we'll give those out to committee and I'll give you my copy later. It's the best one. Okay, my name's Harold Steves. I've been here before. I'm chair of the Britannia Shipyard National Historic Site Society, and with me is Lawrence Sly, also a member of the board. Mm-hmm. We are very pleased with the report that's actually presented as the resolution on the interpretive program and level of service for the First Nations smokehouse. But we are very concerned that staff continues to call it a bunkhouse when indeed it was a smokehouse. And so the papers I've given you is a research report based on the work of Dr. Lynn Ham, the archaeologist, who studied the building decades ago. And Rebecca Clark asked me to prepare it, and so I decided I would prepare it and present it to committee so everybody would have it. But this was is not a criticism of staff, but was at the request of staff. One problem in the Don Luxton report is that he listed the building as 1895, when a dendrochronology study done by Mary Gazettis, who was heritage manager in 1991, indicated that the building was 1880 or 1885. And that is a very serious difference, because the Imperial Cannery wasn't built, or Phoenix Cannery wasn't built until about 1887 or 1888. And all the reports in the 2000 and to present that Mr. Luxton was reporting was that this was a bunkhouse for the Phoenix Cannery. It was there and used by First Nations extended families before the Phoenix Cannery was built. And I think that's the importance. And what Dr. Ham said, and I'll just quote one sentence from it, the rest of it you can read the report later. He said, "It may be a very significant building." And he asked for further studies on the building to confirm what his studies were, that it was indeed a smokehouse. And I've given you the background information that he gave, but some things that staff haven't even had. One of the piece of documents, he gave me his background before he was very sick and knew he was going to die, and so he gave me the background and made me promise to fight to get the name changed to a smokehouse. And one of the things he gave me was a letter he sent to Chief Guerin and Leona Sparrow, reporting that Richmond had somewhat desecrated the heritage site by digging sewers and water lines across the site. I had actually found a piece of cedar planking with a sheet of sandstone about 2 feet by 3 feet wide and flat. And so I took it to Dr. Ham, and he investigated and determined that it was indeed a hearth, and that the cedar underneath it was from a dugout canoe. And when he put it all together, it indicated that the smokehouse, which actually still has 2 vents on the building, if you look at page 51 and 52, Parks 51 and 52, you'll see up at the peak of the building, there's an opening, it's been board covered over, but where vents are for letting the smoke out of the building at each end. And basically, he looked at it and said, we had a dugout canoe to the south of the building. We have a known and a well-known burial ground to the north of the building. And Musqueam elders had said there was a major village north of the building prior to the coming of the Europeans. Now, my understanding is that a lot of people died off because of smallpox before everybody got here. So that's the story in a nutshell. And anyway, I've just documented everything that Dr. Ham put forward, and I'm requesting that the building be called a smokehouse and not a bunkhouse. If you look at the map, the first map that he gave staff was a 1926 map of the Phoenix Cannery, and unfortunately I printed it too small. But at the very easterly portion, it shows the Phoenix Cannery. It shows a U-shaped section of buildings that were actually lean-to hut-shaped buildings for First Nations families. They each had an individual hut in a row. It was not a smokehouse. These were built by the cannery. They would not have had the smokehouse as a cannery building when they built one for their workers further to the west, adjacent to the Chinese bunkhouse and the Japanese bunkhouse that were located there. The other thing that Dr. Ham noted, and we've never really talked about because there's been no verification, but the building that's called the Japanese duplex on the 1926 map is shown as a salt house. That would be a fish saltery. And at that point, it's at the mouth of a slough going north, and the Chinese or the First Nations smokehouse was on that slough, the canoe was on that slough, and the burial ground was all on that slough, all in a row. The next map shows a 1936 map, and it shows, it was a water map for the city, and it shows the actual locations of the buildings. And one of the buildings there at the waterfront, we believe would be the salt house that became the Japanese duplex. And of course, the Murakami house is there and the smokehouse is there. When you go to the aerial photograph, you can see when the smokehouse was in its original location, there was a very clear boardwalk coming out of the middle of the building where there's one single door. And they finally got that right. Previous staff were saying, oh, they had multiple doors. No, they didn't. They had one door. So our staff here recognized that it was a building with only one entrance door. That again denotes a longhouse or a smokehouse. But it didn't go to the Phoenix Cannery. It went directly to the wharf in front of the Murakami house and Murakami Boat Works. It is possible that the Murakami house was quite certain that the Murakami house was not a family home in 1885. And when the builders tried to save the Murakami house, they found the northern end of it had been hacked off. It had been a larger building. And it may well be that this was Marshall English's fish camp, which is logical that you would have a First Nations family or multiple family, multi-family home, a fish camp, a saltery, and a mess hall as part of a complex for people who are catching fish and having the fish salted instead of being canned. Remembering that this was before the cannery was built and before the Titania took the first load of salmon to the UK. So they weren't canning that much salmon, they were salting it. So I've put all that in, and I'm just hoping that we can get the name changed back to what we were calling it right up till about year 2001 or 2002, when staff suddenly, for some reason, rather unbeknownst to any of us, started calling it a bunkhouse. If we go back to that, then that changes how we look at the building. That makes it, well, as Dr. Ham said, that makes it the most significant building on the site. Not the shipyard, nothing else. This makes it the only remaining smokehouse in British Columbia. And we have to find ways that are mentioned in the report that it's going to be dismantled and rebuilt. We have to find ways to restore as much of the building as we can. And I mentioned in the last paragraph of the report, this can be done. You simply put timber blocking under the building on each corner and several locations down the building, and you jack the roof up and the walls up. You then put a concrete foundation around. You put studs down to a sill anchored to the foundation and reconstruct the building. You keep the entire roof. You keep the end gables, which are the most important because it shows the smokehouse openings, and the wood there is not deteriorated. And you can keep a much greater amount of the up and down siding, much more than we actually saved at the Richmond Boat Works when it was just rebuilt. So I'm suggesting two things. If it is not agreed that it is indeed a smokehouse, then on the final page, my recommendation is that we have either the Museum of Anthropology or a qualified archaeologist take a look at the site and determine what it was. And I think we probably should have a review by the Museum of Anthropology. One of the professors from the Museum of Anthropology was there a month ago. I was asked by the chief of the Willitson clan to show him around the site, and it looked to him like it was a smokehouse. but we haven't done anything formally on that. Second, I'm recommending what Councillor McNulty suggested, that the committee that we had for the Chinese bunkhouse and for the Seine loft should be reconstituted, and we should find ways that we can rescue as much of the building as possible. The roof is extremely important, because if it was a smokehouse, you will find smoke in the rafters and in the roof boards. And as far as the tin roof's concerned, we should be saving all the tin roof buildings anyway, because most of the cannery buildings in Steveston ended up having tin roofs because of the frequent fires. And when you take the tin off, you are no longer representing the real history of the community. Was a community that burned down in 1918, burned down in 1906, burned down, I think, was it 1911, that we had constant fires over the decades. And so most of the buildings were protected with tin roofs. So I'm suggesting we go ahead with the recommendation on the program, which is excellent. But please take a look at what we call it, and please take a look at how we preserve it.
Good. Carol, I think you have some questions?
Yeah, I have to make it quick. We're supposed to be at a meeting at 5 o'clock upstairs, so I'll make it real quick. When you said it dates back to 1880 or 1885, was that in its original location before it was moved in 1942 from just further north?
Yeah, that was when it was in the original location. So,
Okay, yeah.
And the original location was further up, and it could well have been on upland, because Richmond was built up of sea berms.
Yeah.
And there's, where the West Dyke is, they called it the Crabapple Ridge. There's a new sea berm now that's a kilometer out, and the tide only comes over it when it reaches 15 feet. It used to come over it when it was 13 feet. There was a sea berm at number 1 road. Oh, and at the foot of the West Dyke, the sea berm, we had the Point family living in their longhouse or smokehouse. At the foot of number 1 road, where there's another sea berm, there was another village site, and we know of those ones. We know of this one too, but we don't know what families live there.
Thank you.
Any further? I have a question. Now, it seems to me that it's important to determine whether or not this is a smokehouse or a bunkhouse, right? This is the major the things you have to determine. Because I think that would affect the programming itself. Am I right?
I'm not sure, I couldn't hear you very well.
Okay. I think it's important to determine whether or not this is a bunkhouse or smokehouse, because that kind of determination would affect the programming that's to come.
Exactly, and it affects the restoration, it affects everything. Dr. Ham convinced me it was a smokehouse. He took me down, showed me where the door was located, showed me where the original buildings were, and I couldn't argue with it. And he gave me all this information. And if it is a smokehouse, it affects the programming.
Right.
And it affects the reconstruction.
Right, exactly. So I don't know what, staff, what is your response to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I would suggest is what we've discussed so far is a lot of the details of the interpretation will be done in consultation with Indigenous communities as well as other community groups like Britannia Shipyard Society. If what I hear from the delegation is that they are supportive of the program in principle, those details of interpretation will come out through the consultation. And I would suggest the same for the ultimate end name of the facility would come out through that process and the consultation.
Yeah, okay, would that be okay?
I think it's okay to approve the program, but I'm not sure if that's the correct route of coming to a conclusion. I'd sooner that we get on with it sooner than going through that process to get there.
Right. Okay.
I think it should be done it should have been done a long time ago. It should be done ASAP.
Okay, Bill?
Or look at the evidence I've got. I think there's enough evidence there to say, yes, it was a smokehouse.
I'm going to ask a question, but I'm prepared to move the recommendation. But I think we've got to listen to the delegation that has a lot more experience than the rest of us. That's one of the problems, we don't listen. And I'm also going to move the recommendations to staff that Harold has presented on the last page. Because I agree with Harold, I believe it's not a bunkhouse. And if we know the fishing industry, the fishers, those, Bell Irving and what have you, never looked after the First Nations and never provided housing for them. And they did very seldom for the Chinese. They did for the Japanese because the Japanese brought the fish in. So I think if we're going to be bureaucrats about this, we're going to lose it. And I think we should listen to it. I think we should get an archaeologist to find out about it. And if it is, we need to put more monies into it and to preserve it properly. And I agree with what Harold has said. I believe it is a smokehouse too. That's why I asked where they have a potlatch. They had it in the smokehouse. So anyhow, I'm going to move the recommendation that it be approved and also refer all the recommendations that Harold Steves has put forward to staff for consideration.
Okay, my suggestion is that, okay.
This one here.
We recommend the staff recommendation that this be approved. Go ahead.
then
But secondly, I think we should also do further exploration to determine whether or not this is a smokehouse, right?
That's in the resolution.
And then a joint committee be set up, right? And then the National Historical Sites and Memorial Boards be consulted, right? So
it.
4 things.
Yep. So moved.
Move. Is it second? Second?
I guess we have anybody else waiting for us to.
You want to say something?
Yes, Lawrence Sly from Britannia Shipyards. I'd heard mentioned earlier, if it's correct, that they're going to replace the shingles, the tin roof with shingles. I would recommend that you stay with the shingles or you stay with the tin roof. When we did the Gulf of Georgia Cannery, when I was there, they put shingles on the roof. And I argued at the time that it should have been tin or something, or use composite materials, a fireproof shingles. And when I got argued against that point, the government of Canada gave the Gulf of Georgia Cannery a pass, and they did not make them sprinkle the roof. If we put the shingles on the roof, we had to put sprinklers on, which doesn't make it congruent to what it would have been back in the 1800s. Going with the tin roof, it's done for safety and wear, and a tin roof does not need the placement of sprinklers on that roof. The Gulf of Georgia Cannery, and I'll just resort to last week's fire in Steveston. If that was down by the Buccaneer, the Gulf of Georgia Cannery probably would have been lost because there's no sprinklers on that roof, and it's a wood roof that they only got a 5-year guarantee out of. So I think we should stick with the tin roof. Thank you.
So I think we can determine on that further down the road when these projects proceed. But for now, so we have a motion that approve this staff recommendation, further exploration, whether or not this is a smokehouse or a bunkhouse, joint committee be formed, and further consultation with the National Historical Sites and Monuments Board. Okay, so that's the motion on the table, moved and seconded. I call a question. Those in favor, opposed, motion carry. Thank you very much. Thanks so much. Board, is there any manager's report? Okay. Jason?
Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'll be brief. I just want to provide a very quick update on the Steveston Playground project, as some council members has previously expressed interest to understand the status. As you know, the playground was originally constructed in 2003. It's been 20 years past, and many of the equipment has exceeded their expected life. So throughout the previous several years, staff has done a number of steps in terms of public engagements through 2015 to 17 in a few rounds, previous concept report to council, as well as a detailed design report to council in 2021 that council approved. So far, the detailed design has moved on to close to being ready for procurement for construction. The design has largely stayed very much the same as previously shown and adopted by council. In the process, we've conducted further engagement with the Rick Hansen Foundation, with the Richmond Center for Disability, as well as close connection with the Houston Community Society for comments, and we've incorporated the comments into the design as well for improved play functionality as well as accessibility. So we just want to provide an update to council that this project is on track to proceed to procurement for construction in Q1 2024, so within these next couple months, with construction planned to begin after this year's Salmon Festival, so that we can minimize impact to the festivals. Construction is expected to be completed next year in June, so June 2025. Also planned in coordination with the Houston Community Society to avoid and minimize any disturbance to the next year's Salmon Festival. Thank you very much.
Good. Okay. No questions? Okay. So any further manager's report? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, the meeting is adjourned.